Good morning. Today, I don't know if you remember, we were going to start going through some Bible stories. And so the first one we're going to do is the story of the fiery furnace. Or maybe you know it as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Funny names, eh? There's lots of funny names in the Bible. So we're going to start, and it's in Daniel 3. And Daniel is a little bit more than halfway through your Bible. So you can find it and read it. Now, King Nebuchadnezzar, there's another funny name for you. King Nebuchadnezzar was in charge at that time, or at least he thought he was. God is always in charge for real, right? And he made a ginormous statue out of gold. Ginormous. Can you imagine how much that would cost and how heavy that would be? It said that it was 90 feet. Oh, let me see. I can't even see how tall it was. I think he said it was 90 feet tall. It was huge. Oh, there it is. 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. 90 feet tall is taller than any building in Vulcan. It's taller than the water tower. Anyway, he made this and he just thought it was wonderful. Now, they did not like people that worshipped God. And so they wanted them to stop it. So this was the idea. They gave this idea to King Nebuchadnezzar. And it says, "This is what you are commanded to do, people of peoples, nations, and men of every language. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipes, and all kinds of music. So as soon as you hear music of any type starting, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that Nebuchadnezzar has set up." Is that a good plan? Do you remember in our 10 Commandments, it says, you're not supposed to worship anybody but God. And you're not supposed to make any idols like this statue to worship. God said you're not supposed to do that. But they said, this is what you're supposed to do. This statue, this humongous statue that Nebuchadnezzar set up, every time you hear the music, you got to stop and bow down and worship it. Have you ever played musical chairs? Probably you have. The way it works is that everybody walks around and does whatever and just walks around and the music is playing, and as soon as the music stops, everybody sits down on a chair, right? So it's kind of that idea, but it's not a game. It's not a game at all. But every time you hear the music, you have to stop and you have to worship the statue. And it was not a game, because listen to what happens. Instead of just being out of the game, it says, whoever does not fall down and worship will be immediately thrown into a blazing furnace. Yeah, not a game. That is for real. And that way, they were going to do away with, that was a good way to kill off the people who worship God, right? Because the people who worship God wouldn't bow down to the statue, and then they would just throw them in the furnace. Now, it wasn't a furnace like that heats your house. In your house, you have a furnace, and you could not fit one person inside of that. And this was a humongous furnace. Okay, so it says, as soon as people heard the music, they fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. He said, I want you, the astrologers, and they came and they told the King Nebuchadnezzar, make sure you do this. I know you set up this rule, but there are some whom you have set over the affairs of the province. Now, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were in charge of stuff. So they went to the king and said, you know what, you think that they're all that. But they're not bowing down. It said Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego who pay no attention to you, O king. They don't serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you set up. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said, "Is it true that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold that I set up? When you hear the sound of music, do you bow down? Because if you do, then everything is good. But if you don't worship, you are going to be thrown into the blazing furnace." Oh my goodness. I don't think that was a good plan. Do you? No, it wasn't. I know it was not a good plan. What do you think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would do? What would you do? How would you feel? Somebody said, "You do this or I'm going to kill you." My goodness. I hope you are never in that situation. And then Nebuchadnezzar says, "Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Because Nebuchadnezzar didn't believe in God. He didn't. So if you don't believe that he's real, then you don't believe he can rescue you, can you? Somebody who is made up can't really do anything. But God is not made up. But Nebuchadnezzar didn't know that yet. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up." So that's what they said. They didn't even need time to think about it. They said, "You know what? Our God is so powerful that he can save us from the blazing furnace. He can do that. But even if he doesn't, because even though he can do stuff, sometimes he doesn't. We don't always understand why he doesn't, but he has his reasons and we trust him." So they said, "He can do that. But if he doesn't, we don't care. We would rather die for God than worship something that isn't true and dishonor him. We want to do the right thing." How happy do you think Nebuchadnezzar was? Did he say, "Oh, okay, that's all right, I understand"? No, he did not. Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual. Oh my goodness. He must have been really mad. He thought, "You know what? I'm going to make sure your God can't save you." And so he turned it way up. And he commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes and trousers and turbans and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. Have you ever thrown anything into the fire, like at the campfire? Maybe something fell off, like your bracelet or something. It just gets burned up. These guys had on all their clothes, their robes, their turbans on their heads, all kinds of things that would easily catch on fire. And the king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Now the men, it says that were trying to put them into there, the furnace was so hot that it killed the men trying to put them in. They weren't even in there. They were on the outside. And it was so hot that it killed them. So the 3 of them fell into the furnace. My goodness. What do you think happened? I bet some of you know already. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement, because he could see the furnace is so big, it has like a huge door. And he leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" Why do you think he asked that? They replied, "Certainly, O king." But he said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, not tied up and not hurt, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Who do you think was with him? It was the Son of God. Absolutely. So there was 4 people in there. I wonder what they were doing. Just walking around in the fire, not being burned up. Do you think they were talking? I wonder if they could see Jesus, if they knew that he was in there. I bet they felt it in their heart. But sometimes we know that Jesus is with us when we don't see him. Nebuchadnezzar could see him. So I wonder if they were just chatting about, hey, Shadrach, did you bring any marshmallows? This would be a good time to roast some marshmallows. Make some s'mores. I don't think that's what they were doing. I don't think they were joking. It was pretty serious. But I do think that they thought it was funny that Nebuchadnezzar was so sure that they would die. And here they were fine. So Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God. Oh my goodness. Did you hear that? Servants of the Most High God. Nebuchadnezzar finally got it, didn't he? Come out and come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps and the prefects and the governors, all the high up guys, all the ones who think they're so important, they saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. It's like they weren't even in there. When you go camping and you sit around the campfire, you can smell it after. You smell your hair. You can smell it on your clothes. You can smell that you were close to the fire. If you were right in the fire, for sure you would smell it. Have you ever leaned too close to a candle and your hair gets singed a little bit? Sometimes I try to light the barbecue and it doesn't light, and all of a sudden it goes, poof, and all the little hairs around my face are all singed. None of that happened to them. They looked like they just came from, I don't know, from somewhere, from getting dressed up. They didn't smell like fire. They weren't burned. They weren't scorched. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him, and they defied the king's commands and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, he's changing his mind about the rule now. There's going to be no musical worshiping. Therefore, I say that the people of all the nations and languages who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way. I would have liked it better if he didn't chop up people who didn't worship God. God says everybody gets to have a choice. They can worship him or not. And Nebuchadnezzar was just one of those people just a few minutes ago. He was not a very nice guy. But the point of the story is not that Nebuchadnezzar was not a nice guy. He changed his mind because he saw that God can do anything. God is amazing. And those 3 men, they trusted him. Whether or not God would save them or let them die, they said, it doesn't matter, God, we trust you. We're going to do this because we trust you. And whatever you want to happen is going to happen. That is amazing trust. Sometimes we get put into hard situations and we just want the easiest way out. But sometimes we have to pick the hardest way because it's God's way. Whatever way God says. I love that story. I think it's amazing. We stop and think about what they were thinking and what they were doing, and just how strong their faith was. So that is the story of the fiery furnace, and Nebuchadnezzar, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. All the funny names. Instead of doing a craft today, I'm going to give you a recipe. Now you're going to need your parents' help or a very much older sibling to do this. But I'm going to tell you how to make s'mores without a campfire. You can do it. Right now there's a fire ban where we live and you can't have a campfire. But we love s'mores. They taste so yummy. So we can do them in the oven. So I want you to get a cookie sheet, and you're going to need graham wafers, and you're going to need marshmallows, and you're going to need a chocolate bar. So you get those three things, and you put your graham crackers on the cookie sheet, and then on one side, you have them all in pairs, and on one side, you put a marshmallow, and on the other side, you put a piece of chocolate. And then the next pair, you put a marshmallow on one side, and on the other side, a piece of chocolate. And you do that for however many you're making, however many pairs. And then you put it under the broiler. Now your mommy or daddy will know what the broiler is. You put it under the broiler for only 1 or 2 minutes. And you have to kind of keep an eye on it because the marshmallows get brown pretty fast and the chocolate melts pretty fast. And as soon as it starts to get brown and the chocolate starts to melt, you take them out, and your mommy or your daddy will take one side and put it on top of the other side to make like a sandwich. And that is your s'more. And it tastes delicious. And it won't smell like campfire. So I hope you enjoy that. And I hope as you're eating your s'mores, you remember the story of these 3 guys who trusted God so much. Have a wonderful weekend. See you later.